Hi, everyone. Kumar Datatran here with the Meridian Point, and I am so pleased to welcome to the stage in 30 seconds, Evan Leybourn, the founder and CEO of the Business Agility Institute. He'll be calling in from Melbourne, Australia. I think that's where he is. And the Institute, with over 7,000 members across 85 countries, Evan has built a global movement focused on helping organizations thrive in unpredictability. He's the author of Directing the Agile Organization and the controversial No Projects hashtag, a culture of continuous value. Today, we're diving into the newly released Business Agility Report to explore global trends, what organizations are investing in, where they're struggling, and how business agility is evolving in this era of political and economic uncertainty. So without further ado, let me pull Evan to the stage. Thank you so much for joining us, Evan.
Good morning. Good morning, Kumar. It's absolute pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. So the latest agility, business agility report, was that from 24 or 25?
2025. We launched it in December, so 2.5 months ago.
Okay. And what were some of the trends you think that stood out for you from that report from last year?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the biggest shifts we saw in terms of business agility, and let me take a step back. So the Business Agility Report is an industry trend analysis. What we are looking at are the patterns and the behaviors that are being expressed by individuals and organizations who are undertaking some form of business agility transformation or change program, as well as those organizations who may not have a formal transformation, but who are have made progress towards developing these behaviors. And in fact, of interest, that was something that we only started measuring 2 years ago. And we actually have a fairly decent percentage of organizations who have what we would call no formal sponsor, which means it's an organic change, which is fantastic to see.
Actually, before you answer the rest of the questions, maybe your instinct is probably better than mine. End of my long day, it's actually 5-something p.m., not morning, so I'm not thinking straight. Maybe it's useful to the audience to take a step back and sort of define what is business agility, how this term sort of came into existence, and what companies are learning from, sort of this change movement to become more business agile, whatever that means.
That is a very good question. So we founded the Business Agility Institute in 2017. So nearly 10 years ago. Our mission at the time was to promote, in fact still is, to promote and create an environment where organizations can look at how they work, not just within the agile product or agile software environment, but certainly across the entire organizational ecosystem. And I often talk about, with apologies to Eli Goldratt, Evan's theory of agile constraints. So if anyone doesn't know, theory of constraints coming from the book The Goal says that in any process, in any system, there is a constraining factor. If you're got a car productions and it takes you 4 minutes to install the wheels and 5 minutes to install the engines, no amount of transformation on the wheel team is going to increase the throughput of those cars being produced. They're still always going to roll off once every 5 minutes because of the constraint on the engine team. The corollary of theory of constraints is there's always a constraint. If you do transform the engine team and you get that down to, say, 3 minutes, then cars are rolling off the production line once every 4 minutes because that's the constraint has moved from the engine to the wheel team.
Yeah.
With apologies to Eli Goldratt, Evan's theory of agile constraints is that an organization can only be as agile as its least agile function. And that's not technology anymore for most organizations. Most organizations have been doing agile in product and software for 10 plus years. They've got iterative product delivery. They're working in short releases with rapid customer feedback. Are they doing agile well? Probably not, doesn't matter. The point is that the limitation to agility in the system has moved from the technology function to the rest of the organization. It doesn't matter if you can create a potentially shippable product increment in 2 weeks and a DevOps release pipeline in 33 seconds, if it takes you 9 months to get a budget change approved, or four months to get a hiring ticket, or 2 months to go through change advisory board or the project control board. Your agility is constrained by the system, the organization that operates within. So I'll stop this rant in 1 second, but let me just finish and actually answer the question that you asked. So the definition of business agility, it is not a framework, it is not practices, it is rather behaviors, how you act. And we will define business agility very specifically as a set of behaviors and capabilities that affords an organization, your organization, the freedom, the flexibility, and the resilience to achieve its purpose, no matter what the future brings. And so those final 6 words, which are, I think, kind of that's the magic 6 words. Do you have the ability to achieve your purpose no matter what the future brings, whether it's pandemic or technological innovation? And if the answer is yes, then you have sufficient business agility for where you are as an organization. But for most organizations, the answer is no. So hence the reason why we promote and support and study organizations. That was beautiful. Really long rant, but
no, that was a beautiful rant, and I love the way you brought in a prop to explain theory of constraints, and that was very effective in my view. I'm thinking about how I can use that in the organization I support right now. So going back to my original question, which was, what did the report from 2025 report? What were the sort of things that were a surprise, or maybe just sort of a continuation of prior trends?
No, absolutely. So the business agility report, and I assume people can download this from the comments or the show notes. The business agility report highlights those industry trends for organizations on the journey, or on some sort of journey towards business agility.
Yeah.
Now, some of the key highlights. So number 1, at the top level, we have seen consistent improvements in business agility year after year after year. Now, we started this report in 2018. So we have, 7 years worth of data. And 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, we have this nice, clean, linear trend. 23, we start to see a bit of a spike. And then 24 dropped. 25, rose again. Not as high as the 23 spike. Right? And so the last 3 years have had more volatility than previous, than sort of during and pre-pandemic years.
It's almost like the stock market.
I mean, funny that, because realistically, the trends here are following the trends of organizational focus, as well as the trends of how employees are feeling engaged. Because a big part of business agility is to create these human-centric organizations. And so we see this sort of growth at the end, like during the pandemic, we see companies trying to be more collaborative. And yes, there were layoffs. Yes, it was a difficult time. But even if you got laid off, which is unfortunate, obviously, for that individual, but you knew why. It was nobody's fault. It was the fault of the environment that you are in, this global pandemic.
Right.
When we start to see the massive layoffs at the end of 23 into 24, like Microsoft and Google laying off tens of thousands of people and so forth, you see this massive betrayal of trust. You've got the return to the office trends as well, where companies were saying, this work from home thing's amazing. We're going to do this forever. This is brilliant. And that promise of work from home got snatched away from workers and employers. And it's like, no, you need to be in the office 3 days a week. And that sort of betrayal, we see that very clearly in the trends, because when we're looking at things around balancing empowerment with accountability or embedding psychological safety, 2 of the capabilities that we measure, we see these massive drops in organizations just around the world. Now, 24, we see it come back up again. It doesn't reach highs, right? But then 25 comes back down again a little bit more. But what I will say is the trend continues to be positive. We've got more volatility, but you're still higher than you were on average 5 years ago. So organizations have greater levels of business agility, but the volatility in the markets is showing itself in the volatility of how organizations are investing in and focusing on business agility.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, 23, 24 with all the layoffs, companies that are, to your point, laying off thousands, tens of thousands of people. And one in particular was a Capital One, I think, that declaring we've reached the pinnacle, where we are agile already, and so we are. It sort of didn't jive, right? Would you say that these companies have reached this level of maturity where they are truly agile, and the promise of agile was realized, that they didn't need all the people that they had, that they were more productive because of agile or because of more agile ways of working, or was it something else?
No. This is a really, really good question. Let me just clarify that. So when we look at business agility, we're not looking at agile. We are primarily looking at the behaviors at an organizational level, like funding models and organizational structures. We're looking at how leaders operate. We're looking at corporate strategy. We're looking at the relationship of the board with the organization. We are looking at it incorporates agile. It incorporates how organizations deliver products and create value for their customers. But we're looking at the organizational system. The specific agile frameworks are not, I don't want to say they're not relevant, but they are a tool that helps us achieve some degree of business agility in some functions. But there are thousands of tools out there beyond just the agile frameworks. And I'll note here, I'm talking capital A Agile framework, not the Agile Manifesto, the values. Those values apply very broadly across any or most areas of the organization. Now, but I can actually answer your question, because we did another study, a year and a half ago now. This was a commissioned piece of research where what we were asked to look at the trends around hiring and the trends for specific agile skills and agile roles. So let's say Scrum Masters, product owners, agile coaches. And what we found in that research, and just for reference, this was a piece of commissioned research by the Scrum Alliance. This has been published, people can download. It's called Skills in the New World of Work. And this was, we've done 3 studies for them on this, and you can download and have a look at them from the Scrum Alliance or the Business Agility Institute website. But what we found very broadly, high level observation, the demand for agile professionals was down, because but at the same time, the demand for agile skills was at an all-time high. So they weren't looking for specialist roles like agile coaches, but in the roles that they were hiring, developers and testers and product managers and business leaders, they were looking for a degree of agile acumen. They were looking explicitly for agile skills as well as agile mindset, so the ability to those values and those principles. So when we look at those global trends, the key here, and some of you may have, and some of your listeners may have heard or read articles like Agile is dead and so forth, which is entirely false. What we found is very, very clear that Agile has become commoditized, much like the car has been commoditized over the last 100 years. People still need cars. People still buy cars. But 100 years ago, a car was a luxury. It was something that, actually, before that, a car was an experiment. It was for the daredevils. Then it became a luxury for the wealthy. Then it became commoditized. And so everybody buys a car. Now, whether you're going to spend $10,000, $20,000 on a Corolla, whether you're going to spend $100,000 on an Aston Martin, it depends on what you value. But fundamentally, that Corolla and that Aston Martin are the same functional product, a vehicle to get you from A to B. This same commoditization has happened in the agile world. The expectation that organizations have is that we will work in an agile way. We will have short iterations. We will release frequently. Gone are the days of releasing every 3 years. If you remember the old software development life cycle and the software engineering processes from the 90s, which I do, I'm old enough, I've got enough gray in my beard to remember that, then you know that a 2-year release cycle or a 3-year release cycle was not uncommon.
Yeah.
Right? Those days are gone. Are they doing agile well? Realistically, probably not that well, not in most of the organizations. But as far as agile as a concept is concerned, it has become commoditized. It has become an expected standard, right, that every person in that organization is expected to work within that concept, which means, of course, the industry is the agile. I'm not talking about business agility, I'm talking about agile, but the agile professional industry, so all those coaches, all those people who have made livelihoods, it becomes harder and harder because in a commoditized industry, it is a different business proposition.
Sure.
It used to be that like 100 years ago, you could sell the most basic vehicle for the most expensive prices because it was a luxury. Right? Now, you like it's like, how cheap do you want to go? How expensive do you want to go? That's your choice. You have that range, and companies also get to choose. Do you want agile professionals? Do you want agile at Corolla prices or Aston Martin prices? Same vehicle at the end of the day.
It's a really good analogy and a really good point that, you know, and it speaks to the maturation of the industry, right? So that business agility, the way you're looking at it is sort of that whole host of capabilities across what culture, customer centricity, people first, leadership, things like that. It has everything but almost nothing to do with the frameworks that are used, right? It's more about how the company's organized and really an eye on the constraints that maybe slow down the delivery of value for their customers, their users, or whatever it is, and how companies are reacting, at least in the data that you're mentioning. What I'm getting from it is that isn't that companies are moving away from agile, but they're making it really part of how they operate. They're looking for people and hiring people with the skills to do the things that were once in these specialized roles, like coaches and scrum masters and product owners or whatever. But they want people with the skills to do that, but maybe not call them that, right? They have other roles. They have other roles to play. They need to have more business acumen. They need to be more system thinkers, more thinking across the enterprise in their company, in the context of the company. And to your point, they're not paying, you know, sort of the Aston Martin prices for these coaches to come in and show them how to set these things up.
And if you want something interesting, also from this research that we did, a year and a half, 2 years ago, was that one of the things that we found, there was this weird dichotomy, contradiction, where on one hand, because we interviewed hiring managers, right? And the hiring managers, and let's take the Scrum Master role, for example, because this was one of the roles that we were commissioned to look at. And we went to these hiring managers and we said, okay, you're hiring Scrum Masters, talk to us about this. And what they said is, we can't find enough Scrum Masters. Well, that's interesting, because we also had surveys and interviews with Scrum Masters who were saying, I can't find a job. Now, the law of supply and demand tells us that both of those things can't be true. Right? Supply and demand tells us that there is going to be some form of equilibrium. Either you've got all the Scrum Masters going, it's like, yeah, I'm getting offers left, right, and center. I've got all those choices and people saying I can't find enough Scrum Masters. Or you've got Scrum Masters saying I can't find a job, and the company's going, yeah, we don't need as many Scrum Masters as we have. Both being high is unusual. So when we dug into that, because of course you always find the contradiction and you want to explore, you want to understand the contradiction. What we looked at, or what we discovered, I should say, is that the hiring managers were not looking for dedicated Scrum Masters. And we talk about like the power of and. What they wanted was a Scrum Master and ... Now, sometimes, and we were talking about skills here. So they wanted Scrum Master skills and technology, like tech skills, dev skills, data skills, AI skills. Actually, AI was young at the time. This is
that's coming up.
Days of generative, but that's definitely one of them now. That's come up. Or they wanted management skills, or they wanted coaching skills. So there was a variety of different ands, but they all said Scrum Master skill and something else. And when we looked at the Scrum Masters who couldn't find work, they were predominantly professional, highly skilled, dedicated Scrum Masters. They didn't have a deep set of complementary skill sets. And that is, I think, from an industry standpoint, an agile industry standpoint, one of the big shifts that has occurred. Where you've got these, the expectation of those complementary skill sets, which perhaps 5 years ago, there was a lot of demand for that specialist, dedicated role, especially in that Scrum Master or that Agile coach realm. Product owners, interestingly, that skill was fairly neutral, as in there was still reasonable demand for product owners, and the skill sets required were still the same as they were in years past. That one hadn't changed anywhere near as much as Agile coaches or Scrum Masters.
That's interesting.
So yeah.
How are companies finding these people that have Scrum Master coaching skills along with the other things that they need?
Well, so let me go back to the business agility report for a second, and I'll come out from the agile industry and just look about it from the organizational system, because the trends this year was one of what we would say is trade-offs. So it's very clear to everyone that the global economy is in a point of disruption. Right? The organizations are tightening their belts. There's a lot of fear in the markets. There's a lot of uncertainty, both in the geopolitical space, in the socioeconomic spaces. There's less liquidity in the markets. Companies are worried. It's not necessarily a bad market at the moment, though in some areas, in some countries, it definitely is. But it is definitely a fearful market, which in turn ironically creates a bad market. But that's an issue for the macroeconomists more than anything else. But what we found in terms of business agility was that the trade-offs that organizations were making around where to focus. So those capabilities that emphasized customer centricity were some of the highest rated capabilities. So, for example, the ability to sense and respond, the ability to integrate diverse ideas, or the ability to fiercely champion the customer. Everything to do with how an organization aligns their products and services to a customer, listens to their customer. These were some of the highest focus areas for organizations. The other area of focus was, funnily enough, what we would call engaged culture, or a high performance culture, where organizations were creating environments to learn. They were creating a culture of collaboration, or what we would call act as one, the ability to create that unity, that alignment across an organization. Now, these were some of the highest areas of focus. Partly because, and certainly from a customer centricity standpoint, companies were going, well, it's a difficult environment. We need to actually understand what our customers need today, because it's different to what they needed 6 months ago, or certainly 6 years ago. So with those shifts came, when we look at sort of like the role of transformation leaders, agile coaches, and so forth, a lot of the conversations anecdotally that we've been hearing have been around what it is that is being asked of those agile professionals. It's been around helping with that customer centricity, helping make sure that what we're delivering is the right thing for the customer, because we don't have as much, there's not enough buffer for us to make mistakes. I'm not saying that it's not safe to fail in some organizations, but actually in some organizations it definitely isn't safe to fail anymore.
Yeah.
You have to get it right. And so that's where that focus on customer centricity is coming into play. If you're interested, the area, so I use the word trade-off, which means if you're going to focus on something else is going to be sacrificed.
Yeah.
And the two domains of the domains of business agility that we study, the capabilities relating to what we call flexible operations, or the governance of the organization, funding models and structure, the actual bureaucracy, the processes, the ability to balance governance and risk, were some of the weakest capabilities, as were the leadership capabilities, which is interesting. Leadership is usually fairly evergreen. There's always money in leadership development. There's companies always trying to create better leaders. But this year, much less focus on creating those agile leaders in an organization. That emphasis has really been pushed onto, are we creating the right product for our customers, because we've got to make money.
Yeah, that's really enlightening, what the report is saying here, and all the information that you've shared. It just seems to me that this is an opportunity. I currently am looking at hiring some Scrum Masters, right, for one of the companies that I'm supporting, and the resumes that are coming through are just, there's so many of them. I feel bad. Like, I have a very limited number of spots to put people in, and the resumes that are coming in are people that are very skilled, very experienced, applying for roles that they probably did 10 years ago. Right, because those roles no longer exist. And I'm intrigued by the notion that it's not that these capabilities, the capabilities that Scrum Masters and Agile coaches bring to the table, have disappeared and gone away. No, that isn't the case at all. It's more that they've morphed and shifted into other roles that the company may need. And so I'm curious, you don't have to answer this question if you don't know. And it just begs the question, well, what are people hiring for? And is there just a disconnect that these people do exist, that they've done this type of work before, and you just need to sort of match up these people that are out there looking for work, that are incredibly talented, and can probably do the Scrum Master and part of the role very well if given a chance. I don't know.
So let me give you 3 quick answers to that. So what are they looking for? It differed amongst different organizations, but common complementary skills. The obvious one was obviously technical skills. They wanted agile coaches and Scrum Masters who could help with code review, who could help with the actual technology, the work of a dev manager or a dev lead, the work of a delivery lead. In fact, even in some organizations, the role of Scrum Masters was replaced with the role of a delivery lead.
That's right.
But forgetting the job title for a second, if you look at the skill set inside the job descriptions, it is Scrum Master plus delivery.
Yeah.
So again, that's the and that they're looking for. So that tech, that dev, certainly in the technology product space, was a common one. Other area was around data. They're wanting Scrum Masters with skills in data analysis to help with reporting and that sort of thing. So again, part of this is somewhat around consolidating roles, but also some of it is just around recognizing that the role of a Scrum Master is more nuanced and more and can have higher value than, I mean, in the worst case, back in the day, I saw Scrum Masters who were glorified office administrators, booking meetings and facilitating a meeting. And let's be frank, some of them weren't that great at the facilitation. They were just like booking rooms. Right?
Yeah.
So now that role makes total sense to go away. Yeah. Now, whether or not it's been renamed to delivery lead because the word Scrum Master has been mismanaged in some organizations, okay, that's fine. It's a rose by any other name. It's still the same skill sets. But the third point I think there is on the individuals themselves. There are a lot of Agile professionals who grew, like they came of age professionally in an era where Agile was easy to sell. Like you just had to say you were a Scrum Master. You had to do a 2-day CSM course and you got a job.
Yeah.
And they don't know how hard it is for the rest of the world, and they're discovering it. And so you get a lot of people very frustrated because they don't know how to sell themselves. They don't know how to show their complementary skill sets. They don't know how to highlight other experiences that they've had and how that helps them help the organization. Yeah. And so there's a lot of people out there who are amazing people, but just not good at communicating their value, their total value to a potential organization. And so they're putting forth what would have got them a job 5 years ago, but is no longer sufficient because the market and the demands in the market have evolved. Yeah. And ironically, we talk about agility. We talk about like these people who are meant to help organizations work through disruption. Yeah. And sometimes they themselves can't manage their own disruption or being disrupted themselves.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, hey, wouldn't it be smart to just be agile about your own career, be more intentional about it, and just read the tea leaves, see what's going on in the world, and adjust, right, and adapt to the environment. It's interesting. I have developed some rubrics that sort of measure the skills and abilities of coaches and Scrum Masters and product people and so on. And the things that people typically do as part of in an organization, whether you're agile or not, these skills are really important. And I did that just sort of as a maybe a sense that, hey, these skills are important, whatever you call the role. Why don't we measure how people perform at these skills, and maybe they'll get better at them and be able to find a job no matter what the environment looks like or whatever the role is called. Specifically. So a shameless plug for my rubrics.
No, absolutely. And I'm going to have a look at them. They sound interesting.
Yeah, I'll definitely, I posted one, there's a post on LinkedIn today for the first one. It's a coaching rubric, but it's really geared to people that are in any kind of leadership role where they're coaching people, or they're mentoring people, they're leading people, right? So it's very transferable to leaders in any size organization. I wanted to get back to the comment you made about structure and flexible operations and governance. A lot of my work, especially over the last few years, has been around that. The disruptor method, one of the I guess you can call it a framework that me and my partners came up with, is really around organizational structure. How are you organized? How do you create a structure by which you can always be, I like to call it disrupting yourself as a company, right? Because that's one way you can think about being business agile, is to constantly disrupt yourself, to be on the cutting edge, the bleeding edge, if you will, of what the customer needs, what the customer wants, being very customer centric. And I'm curious, you mentioned something about structure and governance being constraints to business agility. Or did I get that wrong?
No, absolutely correct. So I'm a huge fan of governance. I think governance is good. Governance is important for organizations. The problem with most organizations is that they are overgoverned, disproportionate to the level of bureaucracy, disproportionate to the issues of the organization. Now, what does this mean? more broadly, then what we have is an environment where, how do I put this? The systems of the organizations will actively undermine or detract from agility. And I'll give you a real example. So we were brought into a financial services organization to do a study. And one of the interesting trends that we saw was that the collaboration, the measures of alignment and collaboration, and I should note, this is an organization that put a lot of effort into business agility. They'd gone through the whole Spotify squads and tribes, say what you like about it. But they had definitely put emphasis on cross-functional, multidisciplinary teams working together towards a common purpose. Great, exactly the sort of thing that we want to see. And one of the things that we would expect to start to create a degree of collaboration, a degree of alignment across the organization. Fantastic. Now, this organization had that for about 6 months of the year. The other 6 months, there was no collaboration. There were silos and almost like active conflict across the organization. And then that would slowly break and they start collaborating again. And then it would go into this sort of breakdown of collaboration. And this is weird. Now, we study organizations. Organizations are complex adaptive systems. In the complexity theory definition of complexity. They are any problem here almost always has a complex set of causes. It's not one thing that causes a problem. It's the combination of variables that is creating some sort of perfect storm inside that organization. And every organization is slightly different because of the complexity, because of the nuance and the context of that organization. But this is one of those situations where we could point to one thing and say, this is what's causing it. And very simply, they were still using force distribution performance management, stack ranking, bell curve. Right? Which means, Kumar, you're my manager. You're a manager of a team. Right? You have one exceeds expectations, one below expectations, and everyone else meets expectations. Right? And that's because that's the curve. That's what you have to give out. And this, by the way, is a financial services organization. So those ratings are also tied to bonuses. Right? So the exceeds expectation gets a large bonus. The below expectations doesn't get a bonus or a very small one. And everyone else meets expectations gets a standard bonus. Problem is, we're a team. We are working together towards a common purpose. What do you think happens to collaboration when that person who working in unity with everybody else suddenly gets below expectations? Like, no, I'm getting exceeds expectation. I'm getting that bonus next year. And it just breaks the culture of the organization. It creates that sense of collaboration. Now, that's just an example. It was an obvious one. It's one that comes to mind because, I mean, we do lots of studies of lots of organizations. But this is the kind of things that we're seeing, the challenges that organizations face. Now, the solution to this one is relatively straightforward. It's more than just, so part of it is just obviously force distribution, stack ranking, performance management is outdated. It's generally not advised for most organizations anyway. But even then, there's one additional step that is needed, which is to decouple your professional development from your management of underperforming employees from your general performance management. Because right now, that's all being done, and certainly with this organization and many organizations, in one process. Right? So the person who gets below expectations gets sort of put it on a PIP or a process improvement plan and exited from the organization in 6 months if they don't improve. No, that's a separate process. Someone who's underperforming, you don't wait till the end of the year until everyone gets ranked. No, you need to deal with that in March or whenever your annual year is, and identify, put them on the PIP, and either work with them to improve or exit them from the organization.
Right.
Independent from your performance management, your end of year performance management cycle. Secondly, professional development. A lot of those performance management is also tied into your personal performance goals of the year. Right? I'm going to attend this much training. I'm going to do this. This is my stretch goals for myself. Those have to be decoupled from that as well, because those are individual. They're your goals.
Yeah.
Right? And then there is the overarching performance, like how effective did the team operate. And we do recommend, and I should also note, we also recommend shifting towards more team-based recognition and rewards than individual-based recognition and rewards when it comes to performance.
Yeah.
You may have outliers, you may have individual people, but let the team celebrate them. Let the team recognize those people as a way of validating and ensuring that everybody there gets a sense that this is a fair process.
Sure.
And I'm Australian, so fairness is such an Australian intrinsic trait that, okay, I'm going to talk about it. Of course I'm going to talk about it.
Yeah.
But it's a human trait. You look at any young child, fairness is like so intrinsic to the human condition that unfortunately I think a lot of people tend to lose it as they get a bit older.
Yeah, that's true. That's really interesting. I mean, I've had other guests on the show. We've talked about this, the individual rewards versus team rewards, and how that can be so such a outsized influence on team performance, company performance, and so on. And I think what you're saying is absolutely, that's one of the key things that influences business agility is how the reward models are tied to whatever the goals are, the company goals, and hopefully tied to customer outcomes, right, in some way. If not, then maybe the company goes out of business because they're marching towards a goal that really doesn't benefit their customers. Their customers.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Yeah. So, I mean, if it's so obvious, why aren't more, I mean, I've been in a lot of companies, and that's not how they do their performance management, right? It's all tied to individual goals. And as you described it, it's the bell curve. If you're a leader, then you're rating people according to that. Why is that so ingrained, or does the research tell you anything, give you anything there?
So it's ingrained in certain countries, and it's ingrained in certain cultures. It's not universal. To pick on, say, the US, for example, the US has a very highly individualistic sort of meritocracy approach built on the assumption that everyone is equal and has equal access to opportunities. Now, we all know that's not the case. It's a nice little theory, but the reality is not. Everyone is not equal. Everyone doesn't have access to the same opportunities. But even putting that to the side for a moment, just in terms of that American culture as it has been established inside American organizations, which when we look at the global companies very much adopt a lot of those. They're either American or have significant focus in the United States of America. And so they have adopted a lot of that hyper individualistic attitude to management. But I'll also go back 120 odd years. So a lot, if we look at scientific management, Taylorism, and this is one of the turn of last century. This is the rise of globalization. Industrialization is well underway. You've got globalizations and the rise of the mega companies. And so new methods of management start being developed, scientific management being one of the most famous ones of its era. So it's literally applying scientific rigor to management methods. So literally counting how many tons of pig iron can a worker load into a minecart? What is the average? What is the standard deviation? So that we know what an average, in inverted quotes, can do.
Yeah.
Great, fantastic. Now, scientific management has long since been superseded by modern management methods. More modern management methods.
Right.
But something else was happening at the turn of last century, which was the rise of workers' rights. It was the rise of unionism, right? And there was massive class tension between workers and factory owners and employers. And so the management methods developed at the turn of last century were very much in that cultural conflict of, in that cultural context of class conflict. I'm having trouble saying those words. You get what I'm trying to say. So now, even though scientific management and other management theories of its time have been more or less long since superseded by most organizations, that fundamental principle of we don't trust our workers has still been a fundamental principle in everything that has been built upon those original management models. Right? And that has cascaded its way through the last 120, 130 years, leading to the environment in which we currently see ourselves. So that's one of the other, that's more of a historic lens as to why things are the way they are.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, and I that makes a lot of sense. It sort of puts things in context as to where we are today and the struggles that companies face in moving to more modern ways of measuring performance, measuring people, rewarding people for behavior and performance and things like that. We're running a little long, but this is such an interesting conversation. I didn't realize 45 minutes had already passed. So I'm gonna end with a couple of questions here that I'm really interested in learning more about from you. So your book, No Projects, argues that if we need to run a project, we've already failed. Does your data show that high-performing organizations actually operate this way and not in a project mindset, but really organizing around continuous value delivery?
So yes. Now, that tagline there in that book is it is hyperbole. Let's be absolutely clear. Right? There is a place for projects.
Yeah.
Right? The issue is that in a lot of the product development that is being done in organizations today, the line between when a project is done and when the product is done is completely those are completely different concepts. A bridge needs a project because when a bridge building project is done, I mean, you can't add features to a bridge. When it's done, it's done. The delineation between build and maintain makes total sense.
Yeah.
But with a piece of software, for example, the delineation between build and maintain doesn't make sense. It is a product, a digital technological product has a lifespan, as does a bridge. But you can continue to create value or improve the total value of that product over that entire life, not just during the build phase. And so that's the point. And so with a lot of organizations, yes, they have moved towards more of that. But this is where, when we talk about business agility, things like the capability fund work dynamically and funding models comes into play, because a lot of funding models are built around projects. And so a product from a funding standpoint is just project after project after project after project, because that's how they allocate funds to maintain, to enhance that product. And the problem is that is highly bureaucratic, it is slow, it is unagile, and there are better ways of doing it. And those organizations that have shifted away from project-based funding towards product or platform-based funding or rolling budgets or lean accounting or throughput accounting. And I mean, there's 100 different ways that you can do this. There's no one agile finance framework, but those organizations tend to be the most mature organizations out there when it comes to business agility.
Yeah, good to know. I don't know if this is something you want to talk about, the merging business agility.
And here's the big news. And so I know this is going, so as of today, when we're recording this, this isn't public knowledge, but as of tomorrow, and this will be released after tomorrow. This will become public knowledge, and that is the Business Agility Institute and IC Agile are forming a new entity together called X2A, taking your X factor, your human X factor, and using that to help you achieve your goals, right? The X factor to achievement. And this idea of using the independence and the research of the Business Agility Institute, and the Business Agility Institute remains, we're not going away, right? We're the same great research organization, and we still study organizations. That's all happening. IC Agile doesn't go away. It remains that independent, credible education, what's the word I'm looking for? Like
certification, credentialing body, helping individuals and organizations with that educational pathways. We remain as is. But this new entity that we are forming together gives us much more of an ability to support organizations on their journey, to give organizations greater clarity around what is the DNA of a modern agile organization, and how can the organizations strive towards that. So that's probably really the most exciting thing. And there's a lot. I know we're out of time, so I would just encourage people to go to x2a.com, which will be live tomorrow. So live when this goes out, and learn more about what it is that is the newest, latest, and greatest work that we're doing. That's wonderful. Yeah, I'm definitely going to check that out. And there's a podcast. You can always come back and we can talk more about it. And
I look forward to
get into more details on X2A and how they can be help that can help individuals and organizations, right? This is really geared to organizations. That you mentioned organizational DNA and how to sort of change that over time, evolve over time to be more business agile. So amazing. I have one last question.
Yes.
So at the top of this call, you mentioned sort of the results of the survey and 2025 bringing sort of uncertainty, right, volatility into the results. The data shows organizations pulling back on empowerment, trust, authoritarian leadership rising, more not just politically but also within companies. For leaders who want to build genuine business agility, despite the environment that we find ourselves in, where should they start? Which of the capabilities matter most right now?
So I wish we had another hour, because we could go deep into that rise of authoritarianism and everything in business and so forth. But I have a very simple answer to your question, and that is to go back to the very first thing I was talking about, theory of constraints. Every system, every organization has a constraining factor to their agility, and it's probably not technology anymore. So the capability that you need to focus on is, in your organization, the point of greatest constraint right now. And that is going to be slightly different. For some organization, it's the funding models. It's for some organizations, it's the performance management processes. For some organizations, it might be the agile processes are still outdated and they haven't caught up. Maybe delivery is the constraint. Right? Maybe you're still in that point. The truth of the matter is that the next place for you as a listener to focus is at the point of biggest constraint for you in this moment of time, noting that in 6 months, it'll be somewhere else.
Wonderful. That's a great way to end the show, and maybe an invite for you to come back on in the future and we can talk more.
I hope so. I look forward to it.
All right. Thank you so much, Evan. Thanks for joining. And
no worries.
Thanks for all of you watching. Yeah, of course. Have a great day. I know it's the beginning of your day and of mine, so have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.